Sometimes we meet people and they just seem awesome. They seem so amazing. You connect right off the bat. It seems to be going well. Everything's fine at first. And then, say a couple weeks later or a couple months later, whatever it is, they just sort of start drifting off. You felt that connection with them, so you're confused. You're like, what happened? The connection isn't what you thought it was. At least, apparently not for them. So you thought it was going to be more, and it wasn't. They don't fully ghost you. Instead, they're better at platitudes than promises. You guys talk about getting together and they say, oh yeah, let's do that. But they never say, oh, let's make an actual schedule. Let's pull them out. Let's schedule a time. Let's make a date, whatever it is. And this could be romantic relationships. This could be friendships, but they don't actually commit to something. They just say, oh yeah, that'd be fun. Oh yeah, haha, that'd be great. Whatever they're saying, it doesn't have any actual official attachment associated with it. So that's not a great sign, especially when you're reaching out. You're saying, hey, I'd really love to do this. Or, hey, here's this, funny meme. Haha, isn't that funny? We should try that. You're trying, but they're just sort of not reciprocating. And it's not that they fully disappear. They'll respond every once in a great while, just enough to keep you not giving up on the friendship or the relationship as much as possible. They want you to still be there, but not have to be there themselves. You try to reach out to them, and 2 weeks later, they're like, ha ha ha, oh, I'm so terrible. The thing is, they don't have to be terrible. They make light of it, but they're choosing to not put effort in, to not put in energy, and you're carrying the friendship, you're carrying the relationship, you're carrying the dynamic. You're the one who's pebbling, who's putting in bids for connection. You're the one who's trying. Sometimes when they don't respond, it's just neurodivergency issues, but most of the time, that person likes the attention. They like having the friendship. They like the status of you guys being around each other, whatever it is. They get something out of it, but not enough of a something to put in energy and effort, especially when you're already putting in so much energy and effort. One person just doesn't want to expend energy in the pursuit of the relationship. And you're letting them know how much they're cared about, but they're only responding just enough to not let the relationship die. They respond when it occurs to them, and when it occurs to them is mostly coincidence. It's not something that they're working at. It's kind of like the whole, whoops, I haven't done that in a while, I guess I better go do it kind of thing. And that's not a great feeling when you're really trying and the other person is acting that way. It feels kind of not great. The other person who's stringing you along, whether they're consciously thinking that or not, that's what they're doing. They're leaving you confused. They're leaving you with just enough little scraps and little breadcrumbs that you think maybe this is gonna happen or something's gonna go somewhere. They're gonna pull out their calendar, but not enough for it to actually grow the relationship or for anything to build. They're setting such a barrier to entry for the relationship that there's like a distance there. And you're trying so hard to traverse that distance, but they're constantly moving further away. The distance never actually closes. The gap stays the same amount. And why they're doing that isn't on you. It's more about them than it's about you. By leaving you unsure of where you stand, they get to keep you there and that relationship in their life, but they don't have to work at it. Let's just use something that gets said a lot in descriptions of intercourse. If it's not an enthusiastic yes, it's a no. And while that can be said for explaining consent during, intimacy, consent in relationships is just as valid. And if you are there and you're saying, I'm consenting, this matters to me, and the other person's just kind of not that into it, pushing them or begging them or hoping from them anything, it's not gonna get you anything that's actually fulfilling or satisfying. If the other person is not reciprocating the amount that you're putting in effort, if they're not reciprocating how much you care, the relationship's just not that important to them. At least not as important as it is to you. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're worthless. It's not you're unworthy, you're beneath me. It's nothing like that. It might not feel that way. The first thing that comes to mind is it's like, no, I'm not as into you as you are into me. What, in whatever way it is, friendships, romantic relationships, this is true just in general. And you might say, well, if they're not interested, then obviously I'm not interesting. They're not interested in me. It's really hard not to default to that conclusion sometimes, especially when you really bonded when you first met. But it's not that you're not interesting. They're just not interested in doing this relationship, or maybe even in doing the relationship this way. They might like you as an acquaintance, but they weren't expecting friendship. They might think that you're a nice person, but they weren't expecting you to be interested in dating. They might just express caring in totally different ways than you. And so they might be confused why you don't like their behavior. Just because they're saying, I'm not into putting in this kind of effort, I'm not up to it, it doesn't mean you don't deserve that kind of effort. It just might mean they're not interested in giving you what you deserve in that way. And it doesn't mean you're not good enough. And you might think, oh, well, if I was good enough, they'd be interested. But it really is about them and not you. There are so many good people in the world who aren't necessarily good at communicating, who might be an awesome person, but they have different interests than each other. Lots of good people don't hang out with each other all the time because they're just not interested in the same things, or they're not going in the same places in life. Maybe some good people hang out with each other for a bit and then one moves away. Stuff like that happens, and it doesn't change that they're good people. And it might make you sad, but please don't let it make you get jaded and start making automatic judgments about yourself and your worth. And also don't let it start making you make automatic judgments about other people. People can be like, oh, my friend just broke up with that person, so obviously that person is, a jerk, or, a loser, or whatever it is that you come up with, whatever narrative you start putting on that person. Oh, my friend dumped them, so obviously they're bad, is in a nutshell what it comes down to. But in reality, it might be that your friend was a terrible communicator and they broke up with that person so they could move on to something better because they knew they were holding that person back. It might be that your friend broke up with that person because they felt guilty, or because they were ashamed of how much they were taking advantage of someone. And you jumping to an automatic narrative about someone that you don't know is limiting. Sometimes someone breaks up with someone just because of the pressure, the sense of almost obligation to reciprocate. They realize I'm more selfish than this person is. And they sometimes get suspicious. They're like, why is this person so great? And they can sabotage the whole relationship because of stuff like that. It's not because the other person was bad. And yet, as soon as someone gets broken up with, oh, they must have deserved it. That's not how life actually works. We're not all black and white, good and bad. There's some good and some bad just in general. And jumping to these really quick category assumptions about people is not healthy. We're all multifaceted human beings. If you met a good person, but maybe you couldn't handle it, you couldn't handle the pressure, that doesn't make you bad, and it doesn't make them bad. It just means you guys weren't communicating well or right for each other or compatible. Some people are just more individualistic, and some people don't feel the capacity or the energy to show caring as often as some people do. And they might say they care, and in their minds, they think they're being caring enough, but they don't want to feel obligated to respond. And they don't want to do more than they want to do. They don't feel a deep sense of significance about the people in their life because they're also thinking about themselves and what they want in their life. And they might not always be aware of just how much other people feel for them or want to have that kind of deep, significant relationship with them because they're not used to thinking in that way. They don't think of themselves as uncaring, they're just being themselves. And that can be difficult for people who are very caring. When they care all the way. They love full on. It can be hard for them to grasp that, to say, oh, this person obviously just doesn't care about me, versus this person cares about me, but not as much as I care about them. And that's okay. It's really hard to say that. Sometimes it's just one person cares in a different way. One person attaches more strongly than the other, or one person just pursues more surface level things just in general, including relationships. It's not always so strict. It's not always so, oh, I'm giving so much and this person's giving so little. Sometimes that's the truth. And if you're not getting enough, you have to get to a point of saying, this is how I feel. And you might say, I love you. You mean so much to me. Or you might say, oh, I admire you so much. You might say, this is exactly how important you are to me. You matter to me. I care about your opinion. I tell you things because I want your input in my life. You tell them full on how you feel. And then they still do that. That's tragic. That's hard. That's very difficult to deal with. But if you haven't told them exactly how you feel, it might just be a misunderstanding. It might just be their personality is different than yours. Their way of expressing caring is different than yours. Some people, especially in a lot of Western cultures, they seem to struggle with like anxiety and insecurities and things like that a lot. And so they tend to keep to themselves more. And that independence can make them think they're introverts because they're spending so much time alone. And it's not that they're an introvert, it's that they have judged that maybe according to like data and stuff, being in close interpersonal relationships is super important and adds to your life. And that's the best life you can have. Well, okay, so I'm not having the best life, but at least I'm not having the worst, because the worst things that can happen to a person also come from other people. And being emotionally vulnerable, putting yourself out there, talking to all these strangers, it's too much. It is overwhelming. So yeah, they'd rather stay home, be an introvert, not deal with the risk. And because they're so risk adverse, they aren't realizing maybe some of the people who want to be part of their lives and pursue being part of their world. But that doesn't make them bad people. It just means they can't process caring in the same way as the person who's all in and full enthusiasm, exuberantly, passionately into the relationship. You have to come to a place of accepting people just as they are. If you really care about them, accept that they're just being themselves. They're just doing them. They're doing what they think is best for themselves. And maybe some people just don't want complication, and that's good enough for them. They're good with that. Sometimes people give so much and the other person's not giving back because it seems like it. But in reality, they think they're giving back all the way. They're giving you tons of gifts. And you keep telling them, oh, I'd rather us go out together, or I'd rather spend some time together. And finally, it gets to a point of frustration. And they're like, why aren't you appreciative? You don't appreciate anything I do for you. I give you all these presents. And you're like, I would trade all of these presents that you gave me, this junk, this random material stuff, for 1 hour with you. And they're like, that's bullcrap. 1 hour with me isn't worth crap. This stuff actually has value. And you're like, no, none of this stuff has any value because it's just material stuff. I'd much rather make memories together, laugh together, spend time together. That's what's important. And it could be just completely different ways of expressing caring, and it's a misunderstanding. One person giving a bunch of presents or something is not necessarily them not caring about the relationship. They think they're giving just as much as they're getting. They think they are reciprocating, but it's a total miscommunication. You still have to accept that that's the way they are, and that's the way they express caring. Some people can accept that. They can make changes. They can say, okay, this is how this person it functions, and I've told them how I function, and we'll work together on this. And then some people, they want it to feel natural. They want to feel that chemistry of only people in their life who also love in the same way that they do, who only show caring in the same way that they do. It doesn't necessarily mean you're bad. Either way, whichever you prefer, it doesn't mean you're bad. People are so quick to get angry at each other, to feel hurt feelings and start lashing out. But the root of anger is grief. You care about someone and it feels like it's not a mutual relationship. The root of your anger is grief. And the grief comes from not accepting people as they are. And you think sometimes by turning that person into a villain that it'll justify how everything is. And you become the hero in your own story. You become the victim in your own story. You become whatever role you need to become in order to be able to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and give yourself a sense of closure. But in reality, they're not bad. They didn't deserve to be turned into a villain. They're just human. They just didn't care in the same way. But the grief comes from not accepting the truth. Sometimes relationships just don't work out. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you or them. Sometimes the relationship's just bad timing, or there's any of the aforementioned circumstances going on. Sometimes you just need to accept that someone's not going to be able to give you an enthusiastic yes. And you can either accept the level of yes that they give you, or you can move on. But trying to push for that usually doesn't work out. If someone's not already convinced, usually it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to just magically convince them. And all of this has nothing to do with you being good enough and everything to do with communication styles and ways of interacting. Just like you should not have intercourse with someone who's not giving you an enthusiastic yes, you shouldn't be pouring yourself into a relationship with someone who's not giving you an enthusiastic yes. And just like it doesn't mean no one would ever want to have intercourse with you if someone's not desiring you right then, it also is just as much that just because someone's not reciprocating right that minute a relationship with you, it doesn't mean that no one will ever want to be in a relationship with you. You have worth, you have value, you are attractive, you are desirable, you are interesting, you have a personality that maybe it rubbed this person the wrong way, but it's not going to for everyone. Different people like different things. Different people are interested in different things. Some of your talents and your skills, some people would scoff at, but there are some people who are amazed by them. They are totally impressed. And none of that has anything to do with whether or not you're good or bad, whether you deserve it or you're unworthy. You are worthwhile. You matter. You can matter to someone. Someone will put effort into a relationship with you. Maybe it's not this particular person, but someone will. Someone will return your sentiment. And at some point, someone's going to be pouring in to a relationship with you, and you're not going to be pouring back. At some point, you're going to be in the same position for someone else that this person right now is in with you. So be accepting, because someday you would hope someone will be accepting. You are worth knowing, you are worth caring about, and so are they. Sometimes you can meet in the middle with people, and that's great, but it's easier to do with acquaintances. It's unpleasant to have to compromise all the time. So, more surface level relationships, it's easier to compromise. It's not that big of a loss if every once in a while that work buddy of yours, you have to compromise, where you go to lunch. But if every time you go out to eat, you always have to pick what, the person you're dating wants, and you never get to have a say, that becomes very soul crushing because they don't care about you. It's fine if you're there because they're getting food that they like anyway, but they don't really care about you. So either accept that and accept that that's the level it's going to stay at, or accept that you need to move on. When someone's a big part of your life, not having mutual respect just creates such a lack of fulfillment in the relationship. And so moving on sometimes is the best option. And sometimes we are a little intimidated at the thought of cutting our losses, sunken cost fallacy and all of that. But it's so important to be able to recognize that quitting is a skill. It brings so much more satisfaction to your life when you feel like you're getting out of life and out of relationships what you're putting in. And that doesn't mean relationships should be transactional, but it does mean that your emotional involvement should match each other. And it doesn't matter how much you care about people, you're not going to have a perfect relationship. At some point, there's going to be arguments. At some point, someone's going to have to give a little or compromise a little. It's completely normal. But if it's a constant thing, if it's a situation where you love talking to them, you tell them that, you express that. I don't want to go 2 weeks without talking to you. I don't want to go a month without us speaking. I miss you. And they don't reciprocate that. They're fine with that gap. You need to either accept that that's all that's going to happen or move on. Sometimes they don't want you to move on. And so they might say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel like a waste of time." But then they don't schedule anything. They don't talk to you. You reach out a couple of times and that you suddenly it's another few weeks and they haven't said anything to you. And so the apology doesn't really land. And maybe they meant it, maybe they didn't. But you need to, at some point, recognize what's bringing stress to your life and what's not. If you go chasing after someone who's not enthusiastically saying yes, you're always going to be adding stress to your life. And whether that stress is worth it or not, only you know, but it is a guarantee that you will be in distress. You expressly tell someone, "Hey, this is what I need. This is how important you are to me." And they respond almost in a, "Oh, that's sweet. That's nice of you to say." But they don't change their behavior. It doesn't actually mean that much to them. To you, it's a big deal. To them, it's like, okay, that's nice of you to say. Sometimes that's more painful than someone being a really crappy person or treating you like a jerk. But it's still important to accept it. To accept that that is the answer. Whether it's the answer you were looking for or not, it is the answer. It isn't going to happen. They didn't attach to you as much as you attached to them. They're not going to ghost you, but they're not creating space for any growth in the relationship either. Accept the other person's lack of effort for what it is.